How dare you? What kind of a monster are you? Why are you obsessed with controlling women's bodies? Why do you want to stamp out their chance for happiness and fulfillment? How dare you? These are just some of the reactions men today have faced, will face, and to some extent must face if they are to challenge abortion in a feminist-saturated climate like ours. As often with great evils, magic words are used to mask the true reality, to make it seem that what is happening is not really happening behind the magic curtain, within the magic buffer zone. When a woman is pregnant and intends to have the baby, even in the early stages, that little person in their womb will be referred to by medical professionals as the baby. At the flick of a fairy mother's wand, those same medical professionals will stop referring to that same little person as the baby and refer instead to the pregnancy, which may then more palatably be terminated, or that deliberately ugly word, the fetus, which may then more palatably be aborted. The men in our time are so often cowed onto the sidelines in the debates over these subtle evils. I was a young teenager when I first learned about what abortion really entailed. I was not a Christian at the time, but my RE teacher was, and I thank God that he risked censure by telling his pupils what abortion actually means and what it may actually require, forceps and all. Perhaps it's not surprising that that male teacher was eventually streamlined from that school. That's often the nice way of telling someone their employment has been, well, terminated. When I later went to university and the subject of abortion came up in an English literature seminar, I had never before experienced the vitriol that would be vigorously torpedoed towards any male who dared speak against this sacred act of womanly freedom. No womb, no opinion. Sadly, for too many men today, this arrangement suits them just fine. It gives them a perfect excuse to be cowards and claim to be the white knights of women's liberation, absolving themselves of any responsibility to speak and act as they ought in the face of so great an evil, no doubt the greatest evil of our time. There were men in former times who knew different, men with bigger hearts and stronger spines. One such man of whom all men in our nation ought to be proud was William Carey, the influential missionary, the father of the modern missionary movement, who went to India in 1793. He's often regarded as a hero by many Indians today, Indian Christians, and had a profound impact on Indian culture per se. What William Carey found in India when he arrived in the late 18th century appalled him. Widowed women, whose lives were seen as effectively pointless once their husbands died, were burned alive on funeral pyres. It was just the done thing. It's just what happens. It was just part of the culture. It's more nuanced than it sounds. Anyway, it would be too complicated to try and challenge it, wouldn't it? We'd get in all sorts of trouble. Well, Carey did challenge it. And today, widow burning is still illegal. In other parts of India in Carey's time, women were told that in order to safeguard their future fertility, they must offer their first baby as a sacrifice to the river goddess, literally throwing their baby into the river to drown before everyone watching. I remember reading a book about William Carey with my young son a few years ago, which quoted Carey's incredulous response to this event. Why should babies be thrown into the river year after year? What an absurd question to ask. How could anyone ever think there's such a question needed to be asked? Or how could anyone think that was a good thing to do? And yet it happened year after year until that man again stood up and challenged it. Why should babies be thrown into the river year after year? A sensible question indeed. Is this so different to what we apparently witness in our more apparently civilized modern society and call abortion? Perhaps there is no river goddess lording it over the women of our age, but don't be fooled by the clinical, technical terms and laws we've invented to salve our consciences. We still very much pay homage to the goddesses. Feminism is one of the most powerful idols of our time. You can usually tell by how angry its adherents become whenever you dare tread on their sacred ground. The shrine keepers of this idol promise women career advancement, personal freedom, social status, economic prosperity, all at the mere cost of that inconvenient little parasite growing in their womb, known to more civilized societies as a baby. It doesn't happen in public at the riverside anymore. It happens behind the heavily buffered barricades of clinics, safely protected from absurdly sensible questions like Carey's, and even, as Isabel knows all too well, even buffered away from our prayers. Why should babies be thrown into the river year after year? Because there have been too few men like Carey, willing to face the flak from the goddess worshippers who believe that supporting abortion is an enlightened moral position, painting those who oppose it as evil misogynists, fresh out of The Handmaid's Tale. In Carey's time, the flak he received also came from his fellow countrymen, including those in the East India Company of the British Empire, who didn't want missionaries like him opposing the local customs, however evil they happened to be. It'll be bad for business, they said. And it continues to be bad for business, which is why so many men continue to keep quiet. Well, at least it's not our children. Who are we to challenge it anyway? And is it really our place to tell them it's wrong? Each to their own and all that? What about the optics? How will this look? How will this make me look? What about my reputation? What will my boss say if he sees me speaking out about that? Men in our time must confront the cowardly excuses that keep them silent year after year. In love, they must stop caring about the unloving names that the feminists, male or female, will call them. They must care far more about the opinion of the one God who gave life to them and to the many littler women and littler men who so desperately need their help, and who, unlike those babies in the river, we will never hear cry. Thank you.